The tragedy of the man-made drought in California's San Joaquin Valley has occupied a considerable amount of the subcommittee's attention, and today we meet to consider H.R. 1837 by Congressman Nunes. California's Central Valley was devastated in 2009 and 2010 by the deliberate diversion of hundreds of billions of gallons of water away from Central Valley agriculture to satisfy environmental edicts for salmon and Delta smelt. The practical effect of this action was to destroy 250,000 acres of the most productive farmland in America and to throw thousands of hardworking families into unemployment. This occurred despite the findings of the Northwest Fisheries Science Center that determined that the Pacific Decadal Oscillation was the principal factor in salmon migration, despite the California Department of Water Resources analysis of pumping flows that determined the pump's influence on salmon and smelt migration is negligible compared to natural tidal flows, and despite the findings of the Federal District Court that the U.S. Interior Department's 2006 biological opinion on Delta smelt was, quote, arbitrary, capricious, and contrary to law. I vividly recall Interior Secretary Salazar's testimony to the full House Natural Resources Committee in 2009, in which he admitted that he had the authority to suspend federal restrictions on pumping, but chose not to do so because, quote, that would be like admitting failure. After 2 years of failed attempts to get this subcommittee to hold a hearing in the Central Valley, the new Republican majority did so earlier this year. Attended by an overflow audience, many of whom were unemployed farm workers, the committee learned that despite one of the wettest years on record, with snowpacks at 165% of normal, farms had been guaranteed just 75% of their contracted water. I'm told that today the snowpack is well over 300% of normal, and only 80% of contracted water has been guaranteed. Also at the hearing, we heard that California's San Joaquin Valley has become ground zero for what's gone wrong with our current federal water policy, the deliberate creation of water shortages by governmental fiat, and the abandonment of the government's responsibility to develop our water resources for the prosperity of our nation. The bill before us today seeks to respond to this government-created disaster with several important steps. It restores the original structure of the Central Valley Project Improvement Act, as that act was sold to Congress by its sponsors in 1992 by limiting bureaucratic takings of water by fiat. It strengthens our ability to control non-native predators that are decimating native fish populations in the Delta, and it strengthens our ability to dramatically increase native fish populations with fish hatcheries. It brings transparency to the CVP Restoration Fund, a federal slush fund that, despite $800 million of expenditures, has had no measurable effect on environmental improvements. And it provides Central Valley Project water customers the ability to prepay water contracts in the same way that a homeowner can prepay a mortgage. I've found the attacks on this reform wildly disingenuous. The central complaint is the preemption of state water rights authority. You know, it's funny, the left never complains when the federal government preempts states that are seeking relief from overly burdensome federal regulations, but it becomes selectively offended when the federal government preempts greens gone wild regulations, typical of states like California. But in either case, they ignore the long-established fact that when the federal government participates in a project, it takes supremacy over issues arising from that project. Like all movements, the impetus for stronger environmental protection of our air and water was firmly rooted in legitimate concerns to protect these vital resources. But like many movements, as it succeeded in its legitimate ends, it also attracted a self-interested constituency that is driven far past the borders of common sense and into the realms of political extremism and outright plunder. And I'm hopeful that we're now entering an era when common sense can be restored to our water policy. Protecting endangered species is a worthy goal, and worthy goals need to be pursued with common sense and sound science, not left-wing ideology and junk science. We need to ask whether the enormous wealth consumed by these policies has made any significant contribution to enhancing endangered populations, particularly compared to far more effective and less expensive alternatives, including predator control, increasing overall water supplies, and hatchery production. This bill does precisely that, and as such, it's the first step in bringing the policy pendulum back toward a sensible balance between environmental and human needs. And with that,